Good afternoon, good morning, and thank you for joining us for this fifth session in our series of expert briefings for this season. This is to be entitled "Caregiving in Parkinson's," an enduring and always very important topic that affects absolutely every family that has ever lived with Parkinson's and ever will. And I'm just very, very pleased to say that, as is usual for our strategy here, we've been able to recruit the very best people representing the various fields that the topics for our conversations. And this session is certainly no exception, with the prominence of the two people who will be leading us for this. Before I introduce them, I wanted to just say that we are at the Parkinson's Disease Foundation very, very grateful to our sponsors for the session, AbbVie, formerly Abbott Pharmaceuticals, AbbVie Corporation, and Teva Neuroscience for their support of this session. As always, they support us. It's an unrestricted grant. We decide what's said, but we're very grateful to have their financial support that makes the whole thing possible. Please note that the PowerPoint slide deck can be downloaded from the reminder email you received this morning or from the PDF web page that highlights this talk. If you're one of our health professional friends on the webinar today, just reminding you that we offer free continuing education units, CEUs, as they're called, through the American Society on Aging. If you registered for this already as a health professional and indicated that you would like the CEUs, you will receive an email from us afterwards with a link to a review test for you to collect your credit. You've just 30 days from today to collect these free CEUs, so please note that on your calendar. Just to remind you that at PDF we do many things in the education and support of research areas of Parkinson's. This is just one part of what we do. If you'd like to find out other parts and would like to, and you're new to this community and would like to see whether there's anything else that we offer that could be useful to you in your journey with this condition, or your knowledge of somebody who is doing this themselves, then please go to our website, www.pdf.org, and learn more about the expert briefing sessions or any other educational programs that we do. So now it's my great pleasure to introduce our guest speakers, Gwyn, Vernon, and Rona Johnson. Gwyn is a registered nurse practitioner, been many, many years at the University of Pennsylvania. Has been caring for people living with Parkinson's disease since 1982. She is currently the national director of the Edmund J. Safra Visiting Nurse Faculty Program, which she developed with her colleague Lisette Bunting-Perry, a name that's also known to several of you, I'm sure, on this call. She's one of the founding members of the Parkinson's Disease and Movement Disorder Center at the Penn Medicine Neuroscience Center, and is a great corporate citizen in our field. She helps in all sorts of ways, and we at the Parkinson's Disease Foundation have been very privileged to know her for many of those years. Her partner in this enterprise today is Rona Johnson. Rona is technically a layperson. Actually, she's a professional layperson, a person who knows a great deal about living with Parkinson's, both through the journey in which she accompanied her husband, beloved husband Bob, who I knew quite well and admired for many years, and who was, in a sense, her tutorial for the expertise that she's built in caregiving, but she's also lent that expertise in many other circles since his passing several years ago, and she's been a continuing reliable volunteer both on the People with Parkinson's Advisory Council, which is a unit of the Parkinson's Disease Foundation. She was a founding member of that, and in other circles too. She's been very, very generous with her time and a terrific spokesperson for care partners. Gwyn will be rolling the slides and introducing the session, but when it comes to question time, which is old-timers among you know is a major part of our session today, either or both of them will answer. I will help to stage manage that and try to select questions according to which of the two I think may have the most to say. In some cases, it'll be both. So we're delighted to have both of them here. And I pass it now to Gwyn to lead us in the slides. Thank you all for coming, and have a great hour. I'll be re-intervening in about a half an hour as I run the questions. And in the meantime, I think you all know this by now. I see a lot of names popping up that are regulars. You know what to do. You can type your question in, and we have two people here in our office who'll be reading them, assigning them, and making sure that we're hoping we get them right when we play them back. If by any chance there are more questions than we have time to answer, then we will handle this after the session with the help of Ms. Vernon and Ms. Johnson and get the answers back to you as best we can and as quickly as we can. Gwyn, you're on stage. Thank you so much for leading us.
Thank you so much, Rob, and I'm pleased to be here today and to have the opportunity to be here with Rona. We certainly have enjoyed putting together a little session and learning about each other and getting to know each other and work together. So today we're really focusing on the early stages of Parkinson's disease. We're going to be exploring the needs of the care partners in the early stages. We'll discuss some skills and resources which are helpful to partners in early Parkinson's disease. We'll hear some very practical solutions and suggestions, and also hear lessons learned based on experiences of other Parkinson's disease care partners. We really chose to do this program because a lot of attention is geared toward the care partners in later stage disease, and we really thought that we needed to address the needs that are certainly present even from the beginning of the diagnosis. Rona, let me ask you, what is meant by a care partner in Parkinson's disease?
Gwyn, a diagnosis of Parkinson's disease, as you know, has profound effects not only on the person who's diagnosed, but also on those close to them. But often there is one person who faces the diagnosis with the person with Parkinson's and who's their closest support. And I think of that person as their care partner. That person may be a spouse or partner, a brother, sister, child, or a friend. But the diagnosis impacts both of you profoundly. Parkinson's is a chronic disease that progresses very slowly. So at the time of diagnosis, active caregiving is usually years away. So you're not faced with urgent, difficult treatment decisions. And in the early years after diagnosis, there's time to build up a solid relationship with your partner to deal and learn about the disease together.
Yes, so a care partner can really be a friend, a family member, a neighbor, really whoever is important and closely involved in the Parkinson's patient's life. Our program today is focusing on the new caregiver, and so that brings to mind, of course, the diagnosis. And I think everyone that I deal with has remarked that they remember exactly how and when the diagnosis was given and what that meant to them. What was your experience, Rona?
Well, for many people, the word Parkinson's disease arrives very suddenly, I think, and shockingly during a doctor's visit. And many people have told me that they didn't hear another word the doctor said after that. For my husband and for me, the suggestion that Bob might have Parkinson's built up over a series of doctor visits over several months until we were both pretty sure of what the diagnosis was. But I remember that whole time as being very, very nerve-wracking, overwhelming, and scary. But either way, there it is. You get the diagnosis. And a care partner whose wife has Parkinson's summarized it very well recently to me. He said it's a situation you're faced with, and you can embrace it or pull back, but it's not going away, and that is, of course, the reality. And I hope today we can pass on some very positive ways to move on after that happens.
Yes, there are 34 million adult caregivers in the United States caring for all different kinds of conditions naturally. And so in that, it would sound like one is not alone, but I'm sure when it's you and you're receiving the diagnosis or your loved one is receiving the diagnosis, it must feel very isolating.
Yes, I think it certainly does. And it takes everyone time to adopt and even to begin to get comfortable with it. I think you need to try to move into an honest and open discussion about it together until you can bring up the word Parkinson's without the other one of you backing off immediately. And that may take some time. Many people react with fear or anger or denial. I think if you can talk about these emotions and help one another deal with them, it will become easier. I very often hear, and I'm sure you do, Gwyn, oh, he or she is in denial. And very often it's said impatiently. But it does take time to work through this, and you both will need lots of patience. I found I really needed to learn to be a good listener and to really focus on what my partner was saying. Because you really need to respect that partner's feelings and their reactions, which is why it helps to talk about what you fear and what your concerns are. One of you, and this happens, I know I've heard many people talk about it, may feel a stigma associated with the diagnosis. So try to work to a place where you understand how your partner feels. But your worries and questions as a care partner are as important, I believe, as those of your partner with Parkinson's. You may not have Parkinson's, but you're definitely in this too. So if you can get a line of open communication early after a diagnosis, I believe it will serve you both well later on.
My clinical experiences, Rona, I've really witnessed how patients and care partners receive the diagnosis differently and adjust on different time frames to this new situation in their lives. There are a lot of emotions when first confronting the diagnosis, and for many people, health and illness and any diagnosis of any condition really have different meaning to different people. So I think what you said about respecting where your partner is in this whole getting to know their new self is so important. We know from research that even in early disease, worry and then followed by tension, frustration, and communication are all big issues, even in early stage Parkinson's disease. And that whole concept of mutuality, the positive aspect of being a couple, they also decline in early Parkinson's disease. What can we do to help care partners along the way so that they can walk this journey together?
Well, Gwyn, I think that one of you may need to talk to others, close friends perhaps, and share the diagnosis so that you can cope better and feel less alone. But your partner may initially be very reluctant or refuse to do this. So you do need to give it time. We'll talk later about how and when to share the diagnosis, I know, more widely with others. But equally, one of you may want to learn about the disease and the other may have their head in the sand. This was certainly my reaction initially. I just didn't want to know. I was turning away from it. But my husband persuaded me that understanding it would put us both in better control, but it took us a while to get there. So during this early stage, I think it's important to keep positive and keep active socially. Just carry on living your life as before. Things have changed, but your life is still there, and you carry on with that. And gradually the diagnosis will come to be a part of your lives. But you'll be able to move on and take control of it. And then, of course, plan on how to cope with it together.
Right, so I'm really hearing, Rona, that the open communication is so very, very key. And I imagine along with this early stage following the diagnosis, developing a good care circle, too, would involve a lot of communication and discussion, as well as support from family and friends where needed. How did you develop your care team?
Well, I guess one of the first things we felt was a priority was to find a neurologist in whom we both had confidence and whom we both really liked. And I think you all need to try and see a neurologist who specializes in movement disorders because they're trained specifically in treating Parkinson's disease. I know that this may mean for many people that you have to travel a considerable distance, but do try to do this. Once your partner's Parkinson's is well understood, a regimen of drugs is worked out, you're unlikely to have to visit the neurologist frequently, certainly in the first few years. And we hear repeated, and for very good reason, that Parkinson's affects every person differently. It's a very individual disease. So your neurologist should be a good listener and will also have many questions for you, and probably both of you. So have your own questions ready at each visit and take good notes. I really feel that 2 pairs of ears are better than 1 at these visits, and you'll get the most out of the visits if you, the care partner, can go to the neurologist also. I know that if you're working, this may be difficult to arrange, but do try to work around it so that you can take in at least the first several visits. And then the other thing I think is that you should not be inhibited, but you should ask the neurologist questions, however trivial they may seem to you. This is all new territory for you, and you'll learn about it well this way. If your partner begins a new drug, be sure you both understand how it should be taken, how often and when, with food, before eating, and so on. It can be very specific. And then you can both observe how the drug works on your partner and make notes of any changes. You may see something that your partner with Parkinson's isn't aware of. And this way, the doctor, with your feedback, can work out the best use of the Parkinson's drugs or any other therapist. And then I guess, Gwyn, after you find a good neurologist, it is time to begin to educate yourself about the disease and to learn rather more. You don't need to do it all at once, but you will feel on firmer ground as you begin to understand the drugs and the therapies, and also more about the course of the disease.
A big hurdle that I see in my clinical practice, Vernon, is that patient and caregiver often sort of debate about who to disclose the diagnosis to, who really needs to know. Who should they tell? Who should they not tell about the diagnosis? And how they should tell people about the diagnosis as well. What has been your experience, Rana?
Well, I think you're right, Gwyn, that sharing the diagnosis is one of the biggest hurdle partners face early in the disease. A friend aptly titled it "To Tell or Not to Tell." Ideally, I think you tell others of the diagnosis when you're both comfortable doing so. And you need to talk thoroughly about this, I believe, until you're ready, and decide who you want to tell and when. And for every person with Parkinson's and care partners, there will be different issues. The average age of onset of Parkinson's is in the early 60s, when the issues of sharing a diagnosis may be a little easier than with young onset Parkinson's disease. So for those with young onset disease, there can be issues of whether to tell young children, teenagers, and so on. It can be far more complex. And perhaps the most important consideration may be how it might affect your partner's career, when to share the diagnosis with employers, and the economic issues of it too. So if this is your situation and you're dealing with young onset Parkinson's, before you decide how to share the diagnosis, I think you need to talk with others who face the same issues. And you can find help through young onset support groups and online, and try to understand the work environment and educate yourself about disability plans. There are others out there who've been through this, and I believe you will be able to find them, and they will share their experiences. Now, a friend of mine who has young onset disease said that what worked best for her when it came to sharing the diagnosis was not to keep it a secret. She said if others knew about the diagnosis, it became a non-issue. She acknowledged it, and others forgot about it, and this worked well for her. Her disease was mild, as it is for many people early on, and that may be the right way for you, too. But I must note that she worked in an industry where it did not risk, sharing the diagnosis did not compromise her job. But conversely, another friend wrote to me, I needed my privacy more than anything. She feared the stigma or the pity that might be associated with sharing her diagnosis. And care partners, I think, may have the same fears. She told me then she began to experience the isolation and tension of keeping the diagnosis a secret. So when she did share it, she found support and understanding. So it is a delicate balance. In my personal experience, my husband and I decided mutually who we would tell and when. And we broadened the scope as we became more comfortable, to the point where my husband might say, as we were going out of the door for the evening, I'm going to tell the so-and-sos about my Parkinson's tonight. So, okay, I was ready and I was primed. So when you share the diagnosis with someone, I think you also need to tell them a little bit about the disease, what Parkinson's is, putting it in a positive light.
Yes, and I often find that patients ask, how should I tell my employer? This is a question that comes to me often, and I really encourage those folks to keep it simple. Something just as simple as, I have Parkinson's, but I'm doing very well with my treatment, or something like, I have Parkinson's, but I'm under very good medical care. Keep it very simple initially. Get comfortable saying those words, and spin it with a positive aspect, such as, I am doing well with my treatment.
Yes.
So so far we've talked a lot about the communication and dialogue between the patient and the care partner, and the need to respect each other and how they are coping and aligning with this news, really acknowledging where the other person is in his or her own journey, as well as trying to walk the journey together. You mentioned earlier, Rona, that we need to become informed and learn about Parkinson's disease. Can you talk a little bit about the resources that are available to help one learn about Parkinson's?
Yes, Gwen, and there are excellent resources, I think, and more all the time. And you can get to them in many ways. So let me run through some of those. First, and of course the most obvious, are the online information sources. But one caution, use them wisely. Be sure to seek out reputable sites so that you don't overwhelm yourself. Then the several national Parkinson's organizations have very good educational information. You can view their publications online, or you can call them and order the materials to be sent to you, which may work better for you. One of the resources I've used many times for questions big and small is the Parkinson's Disease Foundation's telephone hotline. You can really ask any question and get very individualized answers, and I have done this. And they will research more complex questions and then get back to you. We have resource slides, I know, at the end, Gwen, and everyone will see some of these things listed. And I think it's worth a visit also to your local library and find out about local resources. There may be things there that you hadn't suspected. Find out about support groups and see if they have access also to medical databases that you may not have at home and that may interest you. But I guess the thing that really stands out for me is that that we both have found support groups were invaluable. I think they really can improve the quality of life for both of you. My husband was very reluctant to go to a group at first, but I went along to a local one, and I found it very useful. I made friends, and later he came along too. It was one of the most helpful things we did. The group also has a regular breakout session for care partners that I found very valuable, and that was every 2 weeks. So I certainly joined in that. And in that group we received support and we learned. But then as our experience with the disease grew, we were able to give back and support others. And we both found that very rewarding and satisfying. So what you have to do is to decide to take that initial step, jump and go to a group. You can find out about support groups in many different ways, from the National Parkinson's organizations, whom I just mentioned. You can ask at movement disorder centers, local hospitals, libraries, online, and so on. There are a few things I'd like to mention about finding support groups. The first group you find may not be a match for you. If you're not comfortable there, then look for another group, and there may be one that suits you better. But a group for care partners who are not necessarily caring for those with Parkinson's may suit you too, and there are many of those, and usually you can find about local ones. But I do recognize, Gwyn, and I'm sure you know this, that in many parts of the country there are few or no support groups. So if you can just link up with a couple of people in the same situation in your community, and there probably are more of them than you imagine or than you think, then you can begin perhaps your own small group, or you can simply support one another informally. There are now online Parkinson's support groups for people who can't meet up physically, and that too will connect you with others in similar situations.
Wonderful suggestions, Rona. You did mention early on the use of online resources, and I think there are many excellent ones for sure. I do caution, however, newly diagnosed patients and new care partners to avoid chat room online, at least until one understands the disease more and then is in a better place to sort through what people's opinions are versus what the truths of the Parkinson's disease is. So far we've talked about handling and adjusting to the diagnosis and the need to establish a care partnership and open communication, finding resources for education and becoming empowered. All of this sounds like a very big task for a newly diagnosed patient and or a care partner. How can we help the care partners to really avoid becoming overwhelmed even in the early stages of Parkinson's?
Yes, this is really important, Gwyn, because looking after yourself as well as looking out for yourself are really key early after the diagnosis. And also, I think, as important is not letting your role as a care partner begin to define your life or take over. So you really have to try and strike that balance in your life. Make opportunities for socializing independent of your care partner. I know that for many this may not have been the pattern of your relationship. Many people are used to doing everything together in a close relationship. But later in the disease, when caregiving tasks may become more onerous, if you have done things independently, if you've gone off and done some things you've enjoyed, then you've established a pattern of making time for yourself. I think this is important. So think carefully about what you like to do that's most relaxing. Many of us feel guilty about leaving our care partner, particularly later in the disease. But as I said, if you've been used to doing this a little bit, it will be easier for you both. Keeping a sense of humor, Gwen, is something that really helps you handling this. It's so easy for that to get lost in the seriousness of Parkinson's. So I say look for humor wherever you can, and it will show up in unexpected places. One other thing that's going to be much better for both of you is if you ensure that your Parkinson's partner keeps their independence and keeps doing as much as possible, as long as possible. That will really benefit you both. I'm thinking about the things that may begin to be slow or difficult for them to do, dressing perhaps, moving around, and so on. But I do encourage care partners to leave them to do it and resist the urge to move in and take over. It will take longer, yes, but stick with it. Divert yourself with something else. Allow extra time if you're going out so that you don't get frustrated. So try not to undermine their independence.
Yes, in fact, we now use a term or a concept called prehabilitation, really setting the stage early on with counseling and sessions with physical, occupational, and speech therapy early in Parkinson's to establish a plan for maintaining optimal functioning throughout. So early on, we even use the exercise and what used to be called a rehabilitation team, we call a prehabilitation team.
Yes, yes. Well, at the forefront of managing Parkinson's disease in the last several years, it's been recognized the importance of exercise. And it can't be emphasized enough for the patient, for sure, beginning immediately after the diagnosis. But of course, Gwyn, care partners need to make exercise a part of their own lives. It has so many benefits, as we all hear and we know, and not only for our health. I think whatever form of exercise works for you, do it. If you go to a class, it gets you out of the house and with others. If you prefer to take walks alone, it gives you a chance to relax and unwind. And I found that was often when I did my best and clearest thinking.
Yes, and even for those without insurance or limited insurance coverage, you can find exercise groups, some specific for Parkinson's and some not, but yoga, tai chi, dance, YMCAs, and health clubs have groups. Sometimes just finding an exercise partner can be the commitment that you need, that extra encouragement to get out and get involved. And as far as the voice, singing is a very social thing, but it's also a great voice-strengthening exercises. Perhaps the patient and care partner would like to join a choir, for example. So there is a lot one can do with your partner or independently, but I think, as you said, exercise for both can be very helpful in the long run in helping to cope and deal with the daily journey.
Those are wonderful suggestions.
Next thing I'd like to touch on, Rana, is an important issue. I certainly see this in clinical practice, and it's even supported in caregiving research. We know that care partners, like people with Parkinson's, can experience depression, anxiety, stress, and even physical problems. How does a care partner recognize the need for personal help for these issues and find help?
Well, it is hard to recognize when you're getting overwhelmed because that's the stage at which it's easy to withdraw, but it's really the time when you need to reach out to friends and family and to ask for help. And it's something we all find hard to do. But people are ready and willing to help. They just don't know what you need. You have to be specific. Long before this, perhaps when they learned of your partner's diagnosis, many friends and neighbors may have asked you, what can I do? Can I help you? I'm sure you've heard that. My instinctive response was to say, oh, we're managing fine, thanks. But I encourage you to add, may I let you know when we need some help? And then actually keep a list of those who reach out to you. And then when you need the help, you can call on them. And be specific about what you need. It might be something like, can you come by on Friday and spend a little time with Bob? He'd love your company, and I have a doctor's appointment. Or can you help me put in the storm windows? I'm just not able to do it alone. And people will help. They'll feel good about it, and they will be there for you the next time. And support groups, I think, Gwyn, also help care partners find balance and recognize that they can't do it all and reinforce a positive outlook.
Yes, I think, Rana, that certainly flexibility is going to be one of the key qualities that can help care partners, along with adapting to change and certainly identifying what works for you. You mentioned the word balance, learning to rebalance, identify what's not working and rebalance it, and certainly being willing to evaluate your situation periodically and change if your plan is not working. Again, flexibility and adaptability will strengthen the ease for a care partner.
Yes, I think you need to try to anticipate a little bit what lies ahead and plan for it. But that's not easy, I know. One discussion I believe everybody should have is about whether you want to stay in your present home or whether you need to plan to move. Can your present home be adapted as the person with Parkinson's becomes less mobile? Can you manage to take over the chores that they may have done? And it will be, as you mentioned, a rebalancing of things that the person with Parkinson's does now. It's good to anticipate it. Examples of paying bills, taking care of financial matters. Those chores may switch from one to the other of you, or together you may decide to ask a family member or a friend to help. The important thing, I think, is to remember that being a care partner was not a career choice that you made, and you're not going to be good at all of it. So try and recognize what you can't handle and think of who might be able to help you out.
So if a care partner can learn to recognize their strengths and their weaknesses and really understand themselves, recognize and know the needs, and, as you say, seek really specific help, that will certainly bode well for them in the long run. And, in fact, it probably will bode well for the patient as well. Research recognizes that there are better patient outcomes in functional status and reduced hospitalizations in those who have an involved care partner who is adjusting. And so it's very important for myself and other healthcare providers to acknowledge this as well, because the journey of the care partner is equally important to that of the patient. So learning to take care of oneself cannot be underestimated.
Yes, and care partners hear that so often, and yet many of us still don't make it a priority. And we can't do it all. It isn't some kind of a contest to show that we can. And if you're worn down and worried and sick, then, of course, that will impact your partner, as you said. So, first of all, I think I would urge all care partners to keep up with their own health care plans, keep up with regular checkups, appointments, and so on. And then learn to recognize when you really have to get help. I was bad at this. I didn't do it at first, and I remember asking someone to come over and stay with my husband, and I drove to the grocery store. But instead of going inside the store, I just reclined the car seat and I slept soundly for about half an hour in the parking lot. This was absolutely unheard of thing for me to do, but it was a wake-up call because I realized how exhausted and overwhelmed I was, and that I really needed to get some different plans in place and get some regular scheduled help. And it may be that family or friends can help you to take a day off or so if caregiving becomes more intense. More formal arrangements that you can learn about also are known often as respite care. There's something that you can do that will bolster your confidence, make you feel engaged and feel good about yourself, and but at the same time you'll be helping the lives of those with Parkinson's. And that is to become an advocate for Parkinson's. That's an idea very dear to me. It may be as simple as explaining what Parkinson's is and its effects and symptoms to those you meet who, however it may be, who know little or nothing about the disease. And that helps everybody with Parkinson's and helps to reduce any lingering stigma to the disease. Or advocacy may mean enrolling in as a control subject in a clinical research trial for Parkinson's. Many trials require controls, and if you live near a large metropolitan area, you may well be able to find one that you can both participate in. But you'll feel engaged and you'll be doing something. It's very rewarding.
Yes, and as you mentioned briefly, Rona, as the term respite, we think of that sometimes as in more advanced disease, but respite could be some of these very things that you're talking about, asking a friend to come over and sit for an hour or two, or to pick up something at the hardware store, or to help put a window in. You're giving yourself a little bit of a break and getting rid of some of the burden and sharing some of the burden with people who want to help. There's something else I'd like to touch on today, Rona, and that is a situation that I run into frequently where families ask me how they should plan for the future and what should they do.
Yes, that's...
But we know, of course, that Parkinson's is very variable and the path is different in each individual. I think there are probably some issues of life planning that we can address and would be necessary for all of us.
Yes, yes. Thinking about end-of-life planning is never easy, but in reality we should all be doing this regardless of our age, Gwyn. And it's never too young, I feel, to make a living will or to appoint a healthcare proxy. And each one of you should do that. Most important, discuss those plans with those closest to you and share them fully, and give copies of the documents also to them, because they're the ones who can ensure that your wishes are respected.
Yes, and if someone is not familiar with these documents, there is a lot of help available in the community. Lawyers, estate planners, support groups, people that have gone through this before can be of advice here as well. Ronnie is really giving us a wonderful array of very helpful suggestions for our caregivers in the early stages of Parkinson's today. You certainly have a wealth of life experiences which you've so openly shared, and we do so much appreciate that today.
Well, Gwyn, I've been very happy to be part of the webinar, and so I really just say to all care partners, take care of yourself and don't let Parkinson's define who you are. You will feel frustrated and sad at times, but I think if you take time for yourself, and there are many wonderful people among your families, friends, and those who you'll meet in the years to come who will support you. So keep positive and hopeful, and we will find a cure for Parkinson's, Gwyn.
Gwyn and Rona, this has just been wonderful, and I particularly appreciate it. I'm sure many of our friends on the call have appreciated the dialogue that you created. That was really a wonderful way to keep the conversation going and bringing your respective expertise to the table. So thank you for the theater of it, as well as for the wonderful and very sensitive instruction. We're now opening the floor, as it were, to all our friends who were a part of the webinar today. And what I will do, as I always do, is to rehearse the question, sometimes in a slightly different form of its answers, sometimes combining it with others, and then ask one or both of our experts to speak to it. The first question is one of those where I'm combining two. A person from Connecticut is asking what kinds of resources are available for preparing a spouse caregiver or a caregiver who may or may not be a spouse in this kind of setting. And a person from Illinois, in a related question, asks if such a preparation is available, is this better done early on, so that even if you don't feel you need it or you don't feel you're struggling yet, is this a good thing to do as preventive medicine? I'm just advised by Eli that in the resources from PDF, under the fact sheets, there are some quite helpful resources on these, which you may want to refer to at your leisure, so please do that. But for now, I'd like to ask Gwyn, perhaps initially, and then Rona may have something to say also on the questions of what kind of expert help is available to people who, even though they were not trained for this, as Rona reminded us, they feel they need to get prepared in this new phase of life that they didn't bargain for, and they want to do as well as they possibly can. So do you have advice, either of you, beginning with Gwyn, as to where people can look?
Sure. Well, certainly on your screen, we see a lot of resources from the Parkinson's Disease Foundation. There are also very good books on caregiving in general, but not disease-specific, but they can also be a good resource. There's a good book on family caregiving by Dr. Barry Jacobs, who's done a lot of work in this area. I think your support group and just obtaining knowledge about Parkinson's is really kind of the base or the foundation for all of this. Nobody's needs are exactly alike, but frequently people have experienced similar things. So just talking and being open from the very beginning, and even in early disease, when someone is doing well, I think, as Rona so aptly said, two sets of ears are better than one. I know often when I get to the doctor, I forget half the questions I wanted to ask. So again, if you have another person to kind of think things through with and really kind of accompany you and be your companion on some of these visits that can be very useful even from the beginning.
Thank you. Vernon, anything to add?
No, not really. I think the resource list will also have a lot of specific information. And again, I would say try a support group where you'll meet other people. I always think if you don't perhaps even get on a support group or don't find one, if you just find one best buddy who's dealing with the same sort of situation you are, that will be tremendously helpful.
Thank you. This next question is from Arizona, and the person is asking very specifically what happens when the caregiver finds that the person that she or he is taking care of is being, how to put it, difficult about accepting advice that the caregiver thinks that he or she should accept. The specific case here is the person with Parkinson's isn't interested in talking about deep brain stimulation, even though the caregiver thinks that he or she should. But the generic here is really broader. When the caregiver, who, as our speakers today have indicated, can become very, very expert in Parkinson's, perhaps as expert as the person who lives with it, when the caregiver has one view and the person with Parkinson's, who is equally informed and equally smart but has a very different view, what kind of strategies can the caregiver bring to bear that might enable him or her to make the best possible case? Do either of you have, I guess the core of this is benign conflict. There's a little fighting going on, and both partners mean enormously well for each other and for themselves, but they just have a dispute here. Is there a third party who can be brought in? Are there any techniques you can suggest to the caregiver who can make their point better? What advice do you have? Maybe I can start with Vernon on this one.
Well, I guess that I would make sure that you're both looking at the same materials and you're educating yourself in the same way. And I would certainly also make it the subject of a visit to the neurologist that you both share, and then you can get good medical advice on it. It's a difficult one. Gwen, do you have anything to add?
Yes, Rhonda. I do run into this in my clinical practice frequently, and the first things that I go through in my mind when I'm hearing this is what are the barriers to coming to any kind of agreement? And what I mean by that, in my thinking, is there a cognitive barrier? Is someone not understanding both sides of the coin, so to say? Or is there a lot of depression or anxiety present, which is inhibiting the person from making maybe a well-informed decision? So barring those things, I think then we have to also recognize and respect that we're dealing with competent adults who have choice. And the person living with Parkinson's, if they are not cognitively impaired or emotionally distressed, really is a competent individual and responsible for their own choices. Certainly, we would like them to make the best choice, but I think, as Rona said, making sure that all the people involved in this are coming from the same page as far as available information and education on the topic is really key.
Thank you very much. Wise advice, both. This next question also has to do with not conflict so much, but where there's a danger of misunderstanding and tension in the couple that I'm sure exists in so many of these areas. The questioner is from Ohio, and she is asking. She has observed that in the person she's caring for, her husband, there is even early on in the Parkinson's, they're still early on in the journey, that he is showing a lack of empathy for her situation that surprises and I'm sure distresses her. Is there any way that either of you would advise this, what I'm sure is a very common situation? The person with Parkinson's is the one who feels beleaguered, was dealt the bad card at the table, is thinking how terrible it is that he or she should have had to suffer this, and isn't really paying enough attention to the fact that the caregiver is going through exactly the same, in some ways even worse because they perhaps less direct control over it. And so there's a lack of feeling for the caregiver's needs. Is there anything there that you would advise the caregiver to then play back to the patient so he or she could get a better understanding of their shared challenge here. And maybe, Gwyn, could I start with you?
Sure, I'd be glad to, Robin. I think first assess, is this a new communication pattern, or is this the way that person has always been? If it's new, then I would question how much either depression or anxiety or frustration is playing into it. And certainly depression is very common, anxiety is very common, and they can easily be treated in Parkinson's disease. So it could be that the person is really emotionally distraught and it's coming out in lack of empathy. There are some people that just are naturally like that all their lives, and we might not be able to help them, but maybe the caregiver's reaction to it can be helped through some counseling. Couples counseling or individual, whichever would be appropriate.
Yes, the only thing I would add is that you may possibly have a family member or a close friend who the person with Parkinson's respects, who can perhaps also bring a little bit of explanation and some balance to the situation. But what Gwen says is absolutely right. There may be a good opportunity for counseling and help.
Thank you very much, both of you. This next question is very specific. The person from South Carolina is asking how much of a role should the caregiver partner play in medication management? We're assuming this is early in Parkinson's, which is the focus of today's discussion. So the person who lives with Parkinson's is capable, certainly, of managing these medications. But the care partner is wondering, should he or she play more of a role? Is this an issue that either of you found? And is there any advice that you would give? Is it good for the person with Parkinson's perhaps to have the sense of responsibility and control that comes with managing the medications? Is that the kind of thing that should be plugged into it? Rona, any thoughts on that?
Yes, I do have thoughts on this. Obviously, I think that the person with Parkinson's, when they can manage their medication, should be doing it, should be putting it out and organizing it, and taking their pills when they need to. But I think that, and almost right from the beginning, I think if the care partner learns a little bit about the medications and understands how they're being used, then you can become much more of a team about this later on, when perhaps the person with Parkinson's needs to be reminded, and of course there are lots of electronic ways of reminding ourselves these days, which makes it more helpful. But I really think that understanding what the pills are and why they're being used is very important for the care partner too. And later on down the road, I remember we used to sit at the kitchen table every Sunday evening and lay the boxes out and just deal out all the medications together and make a note of where we needed refills. So I think it can become a little bit of a joint project, and I think that's not a bad thing.
Good. Thank you. Yes, Gwyn.
I'm sorry. I would certainly agree, Rona. I think as long as the patient is capable, they should be in charge with also the caregiver informed, because we never know when we're going to be in an accident or end up needing sudden surgery for something totally unrelated to Parkinson's. Somebody needs to know what the list of medications is. But also the medications for Parkinson's early may be 2 or 3 times a day. Several years down the road, it may be 3, 4, 5 times a day. So it does get a little bit more complex. And in order to maintain independence, you've got to have your medications with you and be willing to keep track of them, because you can't have somebody at your side 24/7. We've talked about the caregiver needing to do things for themselves as far as socializing and interests that they have, which is so important to our mental health. And medications, I think, belong with the patient, and for the main part, with knowledge shared with the caregiver.
Thank you. This next question is certainly the most poignant and maybe difficult of all, but I also believe it cannot be that uncommon. We have a couple here where the person who was diagnosed feels so compassionate about his or her partner. We don't know the genders here. that he or she is suggesting that after 40 years of marriage, maybe they should divorce for the sake of the care partner. And the care partner is writing in anguish here, saying, why should I do this? It's so loving of him, but, this is just terrible. Do either of you have a word on this awfully, awfully difficult and very touching situation?
That is a very difficult situation. Rona, would you like to?
It is so difficult. I don't know.
Maybe it's a thing just to reflect on. I was wondering whether I should even raise it, and forgive me if I shouldn't have, but if maybe both of you would think about it a bit, and we can transmit this back to our friends if you think of anything, or maybe we'll have some emails from them on this call as to what might be done in a situation like this. Certainly is. Maybe it's just too much to handle on the fly. So let's leave it hanging there for a while, and let's see if we can get some wisdom on the subject later. But it is, thank you for raising a very, very tough one. Here's one. Let's see where we're going with this. This one I thought was really very touching in a different way. It's a lovely question. It's of Rona, and it's coming. I don't know who it comes from, but the person is asking, as you look back at this time, Rona, you've been alone now for several years. You had many, many happy years before then with your husband. What gives you the most peace of mind now? Is there anything that you did specifically, any strategy that you invented, created, that you feel, my gosh, I really did a good job as a caregiver?
I guess what gives me some, comfort and satisfaction is that we really try to take this thing on together and share it. And I think because of that, we were both able to support one another, and I feel down the road that I certainly didn't do it all right, but, we gave it our all. And I guess the fact that my husband liked to be in control of any difficult situation, meaning that he wanted to understand all about it, and that really led me to take things on by really learning about them and studying and and that put me in control. So that's perhaps a perspective that I have now.
Thank you. Very, very helpful. We have come to the end of our time. We're going to run a little bit over, which I'm afraid we often do, but the subject is so enriching and so fascinating and important that I hope you'll forgive us if we do that. Before I thank our speakers and give you another couple of bits of instructions, I wanted to observe on the questions that came in. We did have, you should know, many questions that came in on subjects other than caregiving. Forgive us, but we thought that should be left for another time. What we have done, since we have a very effective and a very busy helpline service, is almost as we were talking, we have referred these questions that are not to do with caregiving to the helpline. And we've also had some caregiving questions we didn't have time to get to. So those are also going to be referred to our helpline. So the people who raised them, since we obviously have your email addresses, you will be hearing back from us on those. Please don't think we ignored you or forgot you. It's just a matter of the time. But it's also a matter of the subject. For future reference, if you would try very hard, I know it's difficult to keep the questions to the subject in hand. It makes it a bit easier for us to get to the important ones and to have the best use of the hour. So thank you for the questions, but I'm sorry we couldn't get to them all. A couple of public service announcements here. There is an online survey. It should be on your screen right now. Is it on the screen right now, ladies? It'll be popping up in a second. And please complete that. We really do use these things. We say we do, and we really do. So please let us see what it is that what you feel about the program, other things you would suggest, and we will plug those into our thinking about future sessions. I want to reiterate the thanks to the Parkinson Disease Foundation for our two corporate sponsors today, AbbVie, Inc., formerly Abbott Pharmaceuticals, AbbVie, which has been a loyal partner of these cable and webinar sessions for several years now, as has our other corporate partner, Teva Neuroscience. We're very grateful to Teva and to AbbVie for making this whole thing possible. We have an archive, as most of you know, of the various events. It's available several days after the event. By Tuesday, specifically next Tuesday, the 26th of November, we'll be sending you all an email with a link when it's available so you can listen to it again or let your friends know about it. I also want to alert you to the next briefing, which will be the third in our series. It's called Parkinson's, Swallowing, and Dental Challenges. Often not talked about to the extent it needs to be, and often a very serious and sometimes terrifying aspect of the disorder. And we want to make sure that that is covered properly and very well. And we have, I'm glad to say, two experts, as we usually manage to do, with Dr. Michelle Chiuchi, who's a PhD, and Jane Bush, who, not surprisingly, is a dentist, a DDS from the University of Wisconsin, as is Dr. Chiuchi, and has Parkinson's. I'm advised that Dr. Bush actually lives with Parkinson's, openly, obviously, otherwise we wouldn't be saying it. So she brings a double expertise to this very important subject, and that will be on Tuesday, January 14, at 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. Eastern Time, United States Time. Tuesday, January 14, 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. United States Time. I also want to announce a sort of little sidebar to this, but very important sidebar, that we're hoping that some of the care partners on this call, I'm sure many of you are, we have 300 on the call at the moment, and many of you are caregivers, to get in touch with us and get involved with us in the program that we call PDF Research Advocates. It's a program we instituted several years ago to prepare and then deploy lay leaders in Parkinson's, and they really are leaders in the best sense of that word. They're terrific men and women who've gone out to do ambassadorial work for the community in all sorts of different areas, FDA advisement, company advisement, support group leadership, all sorts of things that they do. We have more than 200 of them have been trained. I understand that one of them, this would be a picture on your screen right now, and there's one member of the couple there. I think is it the male or the female member? The Ericksons, their name is, and he or she, I'm not sure I have the information on that. Which one is the advocate? We don't know. One of the two of them is the trained advocate, and they're smiling out of your screen, and these are among the several hundred people we have working on this. So if you're interested in this, please let us know. What you do is you apply to there's a training coming up in the spring in New Jersey, and if you would apply to this, if you're interested in that, or just like to leave your name if you're not able to get to that, with our people who run this program. Ronnie Tadaro is in charge, Colin Schrader, and David Blomquist are her associates. If you please apply by December 16th, for Monday, December 16th, for the training in New Jersey, which takes place when? In the spring? What date is it? Thursday, March 6th and 7th. So if you're interested in that training or interested in exploring it, do get in touch with us by Monday, December 16th. The training itself is on Friday and Saturday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, March 6th through March 8th. But even if you're interested just in general in looking to see if you'd like to do this in the future, check in with our folks. Ask for Colin or Dave or Ronnie, and they would be delighted to talk with you and connect you up. Or you can give us a call, of course, on our 800 line, which is 457-6676. So that is about that. I think that's about all for the public service announcements. Did I miss anything? I think not. So it's just now to thank our wonderful team of presenters here, Gwyn, Vernon, and Rona Johnson, both in the content and the passion and compassion of your style, but also in the delightful way that you interacted. I think you've set a new bar for the way we present these kinds of things, and we hope that all of you who've been part of this conversation will agree with me. Do keep your questions coming to us and to our helpline if you think of something afterwards. And as I say, for those of you who have filed questions, we'll try and get back to you as soon as we can. Look forward to hearing you on our next venture of this in this series. And we hope you have a great beginning of the holiday season, and talk to you, hear you, and in some cases see you all soon. And thanks again to Gwyn and Rona for doing really a terrific job in this very, very important subject. Thanks, and enjoy the rest of your week. Bye-bye.